Okay, we're going to move over to agency disclosure forms for the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors contract. This is for Virginia. And we've got three agency disclosure forms we're going to talk about. One is the broker disclosure, who you work for. I work for the broker when have an unrepresented person in the transaction. But here's the broker. You're unrepresented, but here's who I represent. Okay, the broker. The next is the designated disclosure, designated agency disclosure. Remember, the brokerage is the one that actually has the relationship with the buyer or seller, and then you are an agent of that brokerage. So you are either a designated agent on the buyer side, or you're a dual agent on the buyer side. And we'll explain these three forms as they go along with that. So the first one we have here is the disclosure of brokerage relationship for unrepresented parties. This form is going to be used when you're either in a purchase or you're in a rental, and you are the listing agent and you have a buyer that does not have an agent and they're not going to have one. So you got to disclose to them that you are the representative of the seller. And we see here you got the brokerage name under the first, you is the salesperson in the first line. The second line here is the firm, and then following in a residential transaction for the lease, sale or lease of, and then you have the property address. And then you start clicking boxes here. I represent the seller or the landlord, or I represent the buyer or the tenant. So let's talk about this situation and to start with. Let's say that you have a builder, and your client is buying the builder's property. Okay, so you represent the buyer. The builder is not represented by anyone, so they're unrepresented parties. So you would represent the buyer, and then the landlord is unrepresented, or the builder is unrepresented. You have a tenant that is renting a property, and it's a rental by owner situation. They do not have representation. Or you're the landlord's agent and you have a tenant that's coming in who doesn't have an agent. So I think you get the picture. That's how this one works, the disclosure of brokerage relationship. Okay. The next one that we're going to have is the disclosure of designated agency. This is probably the more of the next agency. This is the one that you'll use more than, say, dual agency. So here we're saying we're disclosing designated agents or representatives. The undersigned disclosure that KW United represents more than one party in this real estate transaction for the sale of or lease of. There's dual agency, then there's representation, okay? The agency is the corporation or the brokerage, and then the representation is on the agent level. So you can have dual agency in a transaction in Virginia, but you have designated agents. So you have agent A, agent B, and they both have a buyer and a seller that they're working with. And we have both the buyer and the seller at KW United. Okay, so that's dual agency is KW United. The designated agency is the actual agents working for the separate buyer and the seller. So you would have this signed up with all the buyers and sellers signing this, disclosure that KW United represents more than one party in this real estate transaction, the lease or sale of, and got the property address, sellers and buyers, landlords and tenants, whichever way it is. Most times it's going to be sellers and buyers. And then we're saying, and you see this is a statutory situation. These are state statutes that are being dealt with here when you're talking about agency. So then we have two segments here. The principal or supervising broker has assigned agent A as the designated agent or representative for the seller or the landlord. Then you're saying what kind of agency? Is it standard agency, limited service agency, or independent contractor? Generally, it's most times it's going to be the standard agency. Okay, we get into limited service or independent contractor. That's a different video. If it happens before we get to that video, come see me or the team leader for explanations on that. The principal or supervising broker has assigned agent B to act as a designated agent or representative for the buyer or a tenant. So it's one or the other. Again, is it standard, limited, or independent contractor? So this is the form that you want both the seller and the buyer to then sign off on to disclose to them that KW United represents both the buyer and the seller. Again, this is the disclosure of designated agency. Okay. And the final one that we do on disclosure is disclosure of dual agency or dual representation. Now, I will tell you this, we don't like dual representation at KW United. We would rather that the buyer or seller has an agent that's working for them and that you don't have the one agent working for both of them. So this is where we talk about we're dual agency brokerage, and this form is also dual agency for the agent, the actual sales associate. So this is where, again, you would say, well, I've assigned this to both of them. The difference on this form is that if you're representing both, and again, I just want to remind you, I'm explaining the form, but at KW United, we discourage this type of disclosure, and you'll see why in just a moment. So under C, the brokerage firm disclosure and client acknowledgement of the following. Select one. Both clients are existing clients. I've already had them work. I've been working with this buyer for a while. I've been working with the seller for a while. And now they both want to work on the same property. Okay. The buyer wants to buy the property that I have listed as, agent A. So the undersigned understand that the foregoing dual agent or dual representative may not disclose to either client any information that has been given to the dual agent or representative by the other client within the confidence and trust of the brokerage relationship. It's telling both of them, I can't say nothing about nothing that you have explained to me beforehand. The buyer has told me things about their finances, about their personal lifestyle situation that's affecting their move. I can't take that information and share it with the seller. Now, even if I wasn't in dual agency, I couldn't take that information and share it with the seller. But we are making sure on this form that both clients understand anything you've told me underneath our confidential arrangement. I'm not telling that to either the buyer or the seller. Or one is an existing client and one's a new client. So let's say I have a listing agreement and it's an open house that I met this new person. They don't want to write the offer without a representation. So now they want me to be their buyer agent, and I've signed an agency agreement with that buyer, and I already had an agency agreement with the seller, or vice versa. The difference is that the undersigned understand the following commencement of dual agency or representation. The licensee cannot advise either party as to the terms to offer. That's big. Okay, I can't advise either party as to the terms to the offer or accept in any offer or counteroffer. How do you like this, Bob? Well, what do you think, Anthony? I don't know. What do you think? Really? Well, what do you think, Bob? I can't advise them under dual agency. That's the kind of like the weird part about Virginia agency law when you go into dual agency, and you can see now why we don't like this in our company. We would rather that the seller be able to get advice, knowledge, and counsel from their listing agent, and that the buyer be able to get advice, counsel, and consultation from the buyer agent. So if you come into the situation where you have a buyer and you have a seller, what we suggest is you refer one of them out to a colleague that can take care of that and answer their questions about whether they should do the consultation on how to approach that. So these three paragraphs are pretty much telling you the licensee cannot advise the buyer or tenant clients as to the suitability of the property, its condition. It really puts the buyer and the seller on their own when you are the agent for both of them, the individual licensee for both of them. That's why we'd rather have a licensee. We'd rather be under designated agency. Okay, I think I can keep on going, but you see what that means. 4, that the licensee may be acting without knowledge of the client's needs, client's knowledge of the market, or client's capabilities in dealing with the intricacies of real estate transactions, that either party may engage another licensee. So we're disclosing everything. If you want me to be your agent, Mr. Buyer, Ms. Buyer, if you want me to be your agent, Mr. or Ms. Seller, and you want me in this transaction for both of them, you're locking my hands as an agent behind my back. I cannot advise you. And this disclosure form is letting them know this is what you're signing up for. if you want me to be the agent for both parties in the same transaction as a licensee. My company can represent both of you, and the broker can designate an agent here and designate an agent there, and man, bang, go at it. You're negotiating for your client, no problem. It's the dual agency that locks the hands of the buyer, of the agent, when you do this under our agency law in Virginia. All right, that's how that form goes. These are agency disclosure forms, and that's the end of that. I will talk to you soon. Bye.